started. Well, good morning and welcome to our DMAC Professional Skills event. Thank you all for being here. My name is Jill Hoyk. I work a part of the work-based learning team here at DMAC, and I will be your host today. We are so excited to be partnering with S&S Employment Partners on this virtual event about professional communication etiquette. Our hope really with this event is that it'll provide you with some insight on how to improve your professional communication skills. Our presenter for today is Grace Wormley. She is a recruiter for S&S Employment Partners, an employment agency, an employment services company that for businesses and job seekers here in the Des Moines Metro. So we're very grateful to be partnering with them today. And thank you, Grace, for being here. During this presentation, if you have any questions for Grace at all, you can leave them in the chat and we will get them over to her. But I would also like to know who's on the call today too. So if you're an educator with a classroom, I would love to hear where you're from, maybe what class it is and how many students are with you today. Or if you're an individual student by yourself, I'd love to know a little bit more about you, maybe what school you're with or what grade you're in. So just like to know who's on the call today. And Grace said that it's going to be completely fine if you have questions in the middle of the presentation of something she's going over. If you have any questions, feel free, like I said, just to leave them in the chat and we'll do it that way. But I kind of have all my housekeeping items out of the way. So with that, I would love to turn it over to you, Grace. Thank you again for your time today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Jill, and thanks for the introduction. As she mentioned, my name is Grace Wormley. I am a recruiter with S&S Employment Partners. So we're located here in West Des Moines over by Valley High School. And essentially what we do is we help people in the Des Moines area find jobs, pretty much your typical Monday through Friday office jobs. So once you guys are looking here in the next couple of years, absolutely feel free to reach out. We would love to be a resource for you. But with that, today we're going to be talking about professional communication etiquette. And sort of the main topics I want to cover today with all of you is really defining what is professional communication etiquette. It can have many different meanings. It can look different from situation to situation. So really defining what this means and how it applies to you. There's a lot of different communication channels that are used in professional settings. So this could be phone calls, Zoom meetings like we're on now, emails, texting, even in-person meetings. So, defining how to choose these mediums and just overall some do's and don'ts, some tips and tricks that you can use, as well as touching on nonverbal communication, which is just as important as either verbal or written. So those are kind of our main points today. And just to kind of kick it off, what is professional communication etiquette? So essentially the definition, it refers to the accepted ways of communicating with others in the workplace. So this is a pretty, vague definition, but everything truly begins with communication. So in order for things to run effectively, you want to make sure that your coworkers, your managers, your bosses, whoever it may be, really understand you or the message that you're trying to communicate the way it was intended. This can help overall prevent misunderstandings, which can lead to stronger relationships in the workplace, better productivity, better teamwork. And being an effective communicator can also help you stand out from the crowd, help you separate yourself, and that could lead to more opportunities for you down the road. So it's important to, make sure that you're learning about these things. And another thing I did want to mention is the idea of emotional intelligence. So this basically means knowing your audience. Being aware of the situation can help you guide your communication tactics. So it's this ability to manage your own emotions and understand the emotions of others that are around you. And then what are the different types of communication channels? So there's a lot of different forms, obviously, both written and verbal, but these are just some examples of things that I use really every day in my professional life. So whether it be email, text, or instant messaging. Some platforms, allow you to chat internally with people in your company, whether it's a phone call, a video conference, Zoom meeting, for example, or even a face-to-face meeting, whether it's one-on-one, a small group, large group. There's so many different ways you can communicate with people. So with all of that, how do you kind of choose which one to use in situations? So what I like to do is I kind of think about these 3 steps before I choose how I'm communicating with someone. So these are some questions that you can kind of ask yourself. So step 1, identify the kind of message that you're trying to send. Asking yourself questions such as, is this a formal or informal message? Is it urgent? Is it time sensitive? Or is it something that could maybe wait till later? Is it confidential information? Who are you communicating this to? Maybe it's a coworker, but maybe it's a question for your boss. These are going to warrant different types of communication styles. And does it require a response? Are you making a statement or are you asking a question? So thinking about these things will help you to decide what communication method you are going to use. And step 2 is really thinking about who you're communicating with. Again, is it an individual? Is it a group? Thinking about these things will also help you decide. And another thing I wanted to mention was observing how other people in your office or just your circle are communicating with each other. So again, kind of going back to that idea of emotional intelligence, paying attention to how others are communicating with each other. And then step 3, you're going to pick your method. So like I mentioned, there's kind of verbal and nonverbal ways of communicating. So with verbal communication, the first kind of thing I want to touch on, you can do phone calls or video conferencing. So these styles can really be formal or informal. It really depends, on the situation. These can also be recorded or referenced later. So for example, this meeting we're on right now is being recorded so people can go back later, listen to it. And, with a phone call, maybe it's not recorded, but just kind of those differences to keep in mind. And it allows you to ask questions and get a response in real time. So, maybe you need to ask your boss a question. This will, get you an answer right away. And then just some general do's and don'ts that I wanted to mention. I think these can be really helpful as kind of a guide for you. So with video conferences, for example, you want to make sure to turn your camera on. Sometimes maybe you don't need it, it's not necessary, but if it's a necessary thing, you obviously want to have your camera on. Makes you appear more professional. It makes you appear, ready to learn and all of that. So another tip I wanted to share and what I share with people when I'm day-to-day talking with people is to try and avoid looking at your screen and looking at the camera. And this can be so hard. I find myself looking at myself or other people in the meeting. But I try to, remind myself, look at the camera. It makes you appear that you're actually looking into someone's eyes if you're not in person. So I think that's an important thing to mention. Logging on a few minutes early if you're on a video call, again, makes you appear prepared, ready to go. It also allows you to get any technology bugs out of the way, things like that. So kind of going into my next point, testing your video and audio before hopping onto a Zoom meeting can help prevent some of that, maybe, nerves if you have to fumble around with things. It kind of gets that out of the way, gets the kinks out of the way. Another thing I like to tell, candidates that I'm talking to when we're doing these video calls are having a clean background. And, if you're not able to, maybe you have to take a meeting from the car or there's some clutter in your background and you're not able to get to it. There's also a lot of times a blur function on Zoom or whatever program you may be using to kind of help with that background and just helps you appear more professional. And it's such an easy tool you can use. In addition, finding a quiet space where you can speak to someone over the phone or on the computer. You don't want to disrupt other people in your office. Maybe you're at home and you don't want to have the dog barking in the background or wherever it may be. So, finding a quiet space where you can devote however much time to really engage in your phone call, your video, just your conversation. And then paying attention to your tone and language. So obviously over the phone, it's more so paying attention to your tone of voice. Obviously people can't see you, but when you're on a video meeting, people obviously can see you. So you want to make sure it looks like you're actively listening. You're maybe nodding along to acknowledge that you're listening or smiling. Just little things like that will help you kind of stand out and separate yourself from the crowd. And then another thing, it can be tough sometimes with technology, lagging, whatever it may be, but trying to let someone finish their complete thought before you start talking on a video call, not interrupting. Obviously, you want to be polite and things happen, but just trying to let someone completely finish before you start talking and moving forward. So that's kind of just some tips I wanted to mention about phone calls or video chats. And if you have any questions or think of anything, absolutely feel free to let me know. And then we have another form of verbal communication, and this would be, meeting obviously in person with someone. As I mentioned, it could be a one-on-one meeting with a supervisor. Maybe you're getting together with your coworkers or team to work on a project. Maybe it's a larger meeting, company-wide, whatever it may be. It can be formal or informal. Obviously, meetings occur in real time. So again, it lets that information flow both ways constantly. You're able to ask those questions, make comments, provide input, provide ideas that you may have. It just allows kind of that open environment to communicate with each other, as well as this will allow you to convey a full range of emotion. So we kind of talked about how on videos, more so facial expressions or tone, but when you're in person, there's body language that comes into it. There is hand gestures or eye contact, things like that can also add to your overall communication. And then just some do's and don'ts with in-person meetings. So a lot of these you can kind of relate back to the things we talked about on the last slide, but again, being on time for a meeting, and I always like to say being early is being on time. So, being 5 minutes early, whatever it may be, it just helps you appear more professional, prepared, ready to go. I think it's super important to be punctual. And then coming prepared. So maybe bringing a notebook and a pen to jot down ideas throughout the meeting or write down a question. If you have a question beforehand, coming prepared with that. Maybe you're going to be in a meeting for a long time, bringing a water bottle or a snack, whatever it may be, so you don't have to get up, go to the bathroom, whatever it may be. And then kind of going off of that, putting away any distractions. So phones, laptops, I know most of us have them on us all the time. I pretty much always have my phone just to check time, whatever it may be. But I like to recommend that you either silence it, put it on vibrate, just kind of try to eliminate as many distractions as possible so you can be fully present in the moment. Dressing professionally, I think, is important as well. Dress code can kind of vary place to place. With us here at SNS, we're pretty much casual day to day. So I wear jeans, sweater, but if I have a meeting or I'm meeting with a client, I like to obviously dress more professionally. So a blazer or dress pants, just kind of, again, going back to that emotional intelligence and thinking about what am I doing today? Thinking about dressing for your day, you want to bring your best self forward. So dressing professionally is important. And then actively listening and participating in the discussion. So again, having those questions, as I mentioned earlier, nodding or just showing that you're listening and participating in what's going on. And then asking your questions at the appropriate time. So maybe whoever's speaking, you think of something. That would be a good time to ask a question on that topic. Obviously you want to let them wrap up what they're saying, but waiting till the end with those questions, maybe you forget or you don't get to those things. So asking them at the right times, kind of reading the situation again. And then when you are speaking loudly and clearly. You don't want to mutter or You don't want to be unheard by someone. So this will also just help you feel more confident. When you talk confidently, I think it helps me overall feel more confident. So just speaking loud and clear and getting your points across that way. All right. And then kind of changing from verbal communication to written communication. Email is something that I use probably hundreds of times every single day. Definitely my most popular method of communication, I would say, but this can also be formal or informal depending on who you're talking to, what the situation is. And it can also be used as documentation. So it can be helpful, you know, if you're having an in-person conversation, you may forget a detail here and there, but with email, this allows you to kind of have that record, go back and reference things as well. And then just some do's and don'ts with email. I think, you know, when I went into the professional world after college, which wasn't that long ago, I was kind of lost when it came to email. I didn't really know, I guess, how to formulate one, what the tips and tricks on how to do things. So the first thing I want to recommend is using a professional email address. So one that includes your name, your first and last name. I know we all have those, you know, middle school emails, pink soccer, whatever it may be. I had it. So just creating a new one if you don't have one, so people know who the message is coming from. And then using a subject line that will convey what you're trying to get across. So keeping it short, keeping it brief, but also making sure you have some keywords in there that show the person you're sending this to what you're reaching out about. Using a professional greeting and signature. So when you start off your email, you don't want to just necessarily go into the content right away. You want to say, "Dear Jill," or "Hi Jill," "Hello Jill." You know, just starting it off in a professional tone will help you set yourself apart. And then again at the end, just a sign off, you could do "Thank you," "Best," "Regards," whatever it may be. It just kind of carries through that idea of professionalism through the email. Avoiding, you know, using humor or sarcasm. I think, again, it's kind of reading the situation, but things like that tend to get lost when it's in written word. It can be a lot easier conveyed in person, and you don't want someone to take something the wrong way. You know, you might mean it in the most lighthearted way, but someone out there might take it the wrong way, and just avoiding, you know, using that so you don't run into those issues. And then again, just avoiding typically using emojis or abbreviations. Again, it's kind of a case-to-case basis, but if I were to email a client or, you know, someone I'm trying to do business with, I probably wouldn't put in a tongue out emoji or an LOL or JK. It may be okay with coworkers, maybe sometimes even okay with bosses. Again, it depends, but just reading the situation is super important. Reply all is a fun topic. This, again, I had mentioned, I probably get hundreds of emails a day. My office here is about 10 people, and sometimes we do a lot of reply alls. It can be great sometimes, but other times it can just be a little overwhelming to have all these responses coming in. So thinking about before you hit send on a reply all, does everyone on this email chain really need to know my great or acknowledging something? It can probably just go to the direct person that's sending it. You know, not everyone needs to always get those responses. So just paying attention to who you're replying to is important. And then proofreading. I don't know the amount of times I've sent an email and then gone back and realized I have 10 different things wrong and I'm embarrassed. And most of the time, you know, it's probably not that big of a deal, but I think proofreading is important. It helps you come across more professional, like you've taken the time to really read what you're sending, and including a signature, again, I think is important. This could be just including your name, a phone number, and a good way to contact you, whether it's your email, things of that nature. Just wraps it up and again, helps that professionalism come through. And then last but not least, for written communication, text message or even instant messaging. A lot of companies have different programs within their systems that allow you to communicate internally, and it basically acts as a text message. This can be a great way to connect quickly with someone. Maybe you just have a quick question that requires a yes or no response, something like that. Definitely more of an informal method as well, obviously, as texting. And typically I would use this for more brief conversations, questions, things like that. And then just some do's and don'ts. A lot of these are kind of similar to email. But like I had mentioned, use this when you need a quick response, a yes or no answer. Maybe you have a question for a coworker quick, just things like that. Again, reading the situation. Never texting confidential information. So depending on what you're doing, what jobs you have, there may be sensitive information that you can't share certain ways. So you never would want to text this, especially from a personal phone. It's typically better coming either in an email or verbally. Also, I would not recommend using text to deliver any sort of bad news. So, if you're quitting a job, you obviously wouldn't want to text your boss this. You would want to have an in-person conversation to really discuss it. Again, just avoiding bad news over text helps prevent a lot of things. Again, I had mentioned this with emails, but avoiding emojis, abbreviations, sometimes it can be okay in texting. Again, it's really just reading the situation. Replying promptly when it comes to these. Most of us have our phones on us all the time. We see texts come through. So just getting back to those right away. I also know for myself, if I don't respond to something, the second I see it, I'll forget. And then it's kind of hard to go back 2-3 days later and say, oh, sorry, just getting back to you when you're trying to get that quick response. So just being courteous to the other person and replying promptly. And then just keeping it brief. If you have a long paragraph to send someone, then probably just give them a call, pick up the phone. It's easier that way, or send an email. If again, it's a quick question, a text is probably a good appropriate method to choose. And then proofreading. So I didn't mention this with email, but what I like to do before I really hit send on anything is I try to read it out loud just to make sure it makes sense. I'm having commas in the right places. I have correct punctuation, no spelling errors. It just helps you catch those things before you hit send. So proofreading, again, super important in any sort of written communication you're doing. Right. And then I wanted to mention the 7 C's of communication. And I don't know if any of you have heard this before. I personally hadn't heard of it before I went to college. And this was something I learned in one of my classes that has helped me so much in my professional life. I basically think of it as a checklist that I use before communicating with someone. So the 7 C's are clear, concise, concrete, correct, coherent, complete, and courteous. So clear, thinking about what is your goal or your purpose of this and trying to minimize the amount of ideas. You want your reader to understand your message clearly. Staying concise, so sticking to the point, keeping it brief, eliminating filler words, things of that nature. Concrete, providing clear details, but not too many that it becomes confusing. You just want to really include the necessary things. Correct. Obviously, you want to make sure what you're saying is right, making sure your grammar is right, punctuation, capitalization. So not only the content, but also the communication. Making sure things are coherent. So is it logical? Does it flow well? Does everything I'm saying, do my points relate back to the main topic that I'm trying to communicate? Making sure it's complete. So again, including all necessary information. And then courteous, so just being friendly, open, honest, not having passive aggressive undertones, just having that friendly tone will help convey your message as well. So I like to use that again before I really do anything. I just kind of go through those in my head and say, okay, do all of these check those boxes?
Hey, Grace, I was going to add something with that one.
Yeah.
I know too, sometimes when we're communicating with people that maybe aren't in our profession or about something, that sometimes we use acronyms. And I think sometimes we need to remember that maybe not everybody knows what that acronym means too as well. So when you're being concise with what you're saying, I always like to think, do they understand what this acronym is? And maybe if they don't, spell it out and then put the acronym in parentheses too as well. Because I know a lot of business and industries utilize acronyms. And if you're communicating with somebody who maybe doesn't know what that is, that could be very confusing as well.
Yes, that is such a great point, Jill. I think so many different industries have different acronyms. So that's an awesome point, making sure you spell that out the first time, putting that in parentheses again so maybe later if you're talking about it, you can do it that way, but setting that out clear the first time is super helpful for sure. Awesome. Yeah. And then, last but not least, kind of what I wanted to talk about today is nonverbal communication. So just as important as written or verbal communication, nonverbal is just as, if not more so, just a fact that 90% of how we communicate is nonverbal. So only 7% of how we're communicating is really through the actual words we're using. Most of it comes from your body language, your voice, or other things. So sort of the main forms of nonverbal communication are facial expressions, body language, gestures, eye contact, touch, space, voice, and appearance. So facial expressions, obviously the human face is very expressive. We can show happiness, sadness, anger, fear, disgust, whatever it may be. Our faces can very clearly show what we're thinking. So being cognizant of how you're leaving your face, making sure you're not giving a negative facial expression, even though you may be thinking it, keeping that outward appearance the way you want it to be. And then body language. Again, a lot of things can be conveyed through body language. So if you're crossing your arms, you may appear uninterested. But if you're sitting up straight and, nodding your head, that's going to show that you're listening and you're paying attention. So being aware of your body language and how that's displaying what you're thinking. I think, a lot of it can be subconscious that you're doing. So it's important to just try and think about what you're doing with your body as well. Gestures can be another way that we can communicate non-verbally. So this may be, talking with your hands. I'm not doing it that much now, surprisingly, but normally I'm a big hand talker. So that can be a gesture, shaking someone's hand, giving someone a hug. All of those gestures that we use on a day-to-day basis convey different messages. So figuring out and using those appropriately are going to help convey your overall verbal message as well. And then eye contact. I think eye contact is so important. Making eye contact with people shows that you are interested, you're listening to what they're talking about. If you're, staring off into space when someone's talking to you, it's not going to appear as well. So paying attention to where your eyes are. Touch kind of goes along with gestures, but something like giving a handshake, a hug, those are going to convey certain messages. And then paying attention to space. So personal space, you don't want to be too close to someone, but you also don't want to be too far away from someone. So paying attention to where you are, where you're holding yourself in a room, even something as simple as going into a meeting and you're the only one in the room. You probably don't want to sit in the very, very back of the room. Just something like that when, there's maybe not as many people, you want to kind of create that close proximity, but not too close. Just thinking about, having that spatial awareness as well. And then your voice. So your tone of voice, your inflection, your spacing, your pausing, your punctuation, all of those things can also play a huge factor into our nonverbals. So not only what you're saying, but how you say it is so important. I don't know if you've heard that before, but again, it's not necessarily always what you say, but how you're saying it. And then appearance. So appearance can also play a huge part into your nonverbals. So, making sure you're and you don't necessarily always have to be dressed in a suit, but taking the time in the morning to brush your hair, brush your teeth, put on deodorant, just the little things like that are going to help you appear more professional to everyone. Maybe putting on a little makeup if you don't every day. Just things like that are going to help you stand out from the crowd as well. So those are just nonverbal. And again, I think it's so important to pay attention to these. And we don't always, I don't always think about these things, but I think it's important to kind of get that into your brain that so much of how we communicate is through these nonverbals. So, and then just some final takeaways from today. So having professional communication etiquette in any form will always help you stand out from the crowd. It can provide those opportunities down the road when you can carry yourself in a professional manner. It's so important to always be actively listening in whatever you're doing, especially in a professional sense. When you have a job, that's kind of what you're devoted to at that time. So understanding what's going on, actively listening and being a part of the conversation, being a part of the ideas, the brainstorming, all of that is going to help you. I wanted to say to remember that 7 C's of communication checklist. For me, it's been so helpful when I'm communicating. Hopefully it can maybe provide as a tool for you as well. So trying to think back and checking off those boxes before you communicate with someone. And then just kind of overall, there really isn't a one size fits all when it comes to communication in the workplace. Again, it's really relying on that idea of emotional intelligence, reading the situation, reading who you're going to be speaking with, whatever it may be, using that. And just at the end of the day, go with your gut. You probably know what's best. And if you don't think it's going to be as great as you think, it probably won't be. So just, go with your gut at the end of the day. And that is all I have. If you want to contact me, my information is here. I would love to chat. Even if you ever working on a resume, you can always send that to me. I'd love to, even just be a resource that way. I look at resumes every day. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And then I also attached the RSNS website, so you can go out, learn more if you want. We post our jobs that we're working on. And then my LinkedIn profile as well, if any of you have one and want to connect.
Thanks so much, Grace. We did have a question in the chat, and then someone else kind of helped answer it too, but I would love to hear your thoughts on it. How can we figure out what nonverbal communication to use based on the person we are communicating with? And then someone wrote back and said, by really paying attention to how they are speaking and what they're talking about. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
I think that is a great response. I think a lot of communication is kind of touch and go. It's reading those people, the other people that we're speaking with, and kind of figuring out their tone, what they're doing. That's going to help you be able to respond to their communication as well. So I think that's a great response for sure.
Yeah, I think for me, sometimes what I do, if I'm speaking to like a class or a big room of people, and I'm giving like instructions on the day or the event or something, and I have all this information to share and it says it on their agenda or something like that. And I can tell that I'm kind of losing people. They're kind of moving on. They just want to get up and get going to their next session or what have you, that I'm dragging it out maybe a little bit too long. I kind of read the room with that, like their body language. Are a lot of them disengaging? If so, I need to probably move along here. So that's kind of what I do too, is when I'm speaking, seeing what other people are doing. Are they still paying attention to me? Am I going a little long? So that's what I like to do, is just kind of look up and see, okay, one's not paying attention, but the rest are. Okay, I'll take that.
Yes.
Or that type of thing. So that's another way that I do that.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point for sure.
And one thing, yeah, no problem, Christina. Another thing that I like to do too, sometimes within the workplace, you're maybe meeting with people from different departments, or, people that you don't always get to speak with. And so sometimes I just kind of like to open up the conversation. I know people love to talk about the weather or just something really non-biased, and just kind of get them talking. Or here at DMAC, we had spring break a couple of weeks ago. And so I was like, hey, did you do anything for spring break? I didn't do anything cool for spring break, so I didn't really have much to share, but I love hearing what other people are doing too as well. So sometimes just engaging in conversation that doesn't always need to be before the meeting starts or before you start communicating with someone, just kind of having a little bit of what people call small talk, which I know not everyone enjoys, but it just kind of lightens the mood for a little bit. And then you can dive into the business that you need to do.
Absolutely. I think it definitely can help. Yeah. Just set that tone, have that kind of friendly, casual, and then exactly you can kind of go into your information for sure.
Yeah. Does anybody else on the call have any questions at all? I just want to make sure we're covering everything. I know Grace did a wonderful job of speaking to us on kind of all the channels. And I know too, this may seem like a lot of information as far as like, you should do this or you shouldn't do that. But I will assure you, once you get into a certain workplace, like Grace mentioned, each workplace is going to be different in how they communicate. Some are going to be, very strategic on the way that the communication channels work. Others are going to be really casual and that type of thing. So even in higher education, working at a college is different than probably how people communicate in high schools. So you kind of just get to know the culture of what you're working with. And again, emotional intelligence, is this appropriate for this setting or not appropriate, that type of thing. So it's a lot easier than I think when we put it out in a presentation, like, oh my gosh, I have to do this and think about that and do this and think about that. It's really not as daunting and overwhelming as it seems, maybe.
For sure.
Do you agree,
Definitely,
Grace?
Definitely agree. Yeah. I think you kind of have this big doomed fear of, oh my gosh, am I doing this right? And it's really not that deep at the end of the day. So yeah. It's just, it's reading the situations and kind of figuring out your company's culture, who you're talking to, all of that.
Absolutely. Well, Grace, thank you so much for your time today. And I learned a lot, and I hope those of you on the call learned some too. Like I said, we record these sessions, and so they will be on our Work-Based Learning website on DMAC. But again, Grace, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everybody, for logging in today. We appreciate it. Everyone, go have a great Tuesday.
Yes, thank you for having me, and thank you all for listening.